Okay, hi. Hi, friends and new friends. Welcome. Happy afternoon. Happy Door County Century weekend. I'm Dr. Deb, and I am a doctor of physical therapy and a certified bike fitter at Bike and Body in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Thank you. Thanks for being here to support you guys, and then everybody else that I haven't met yet, but I'll meet after this. Let's chat. Thank you for being here. We're going to talk about power today. We all want more power, right? We're in a constant thirst for more power. Let me pause really quickly here because I didn't start my other voice recorder. Oops. One moment, please.
Wardrobe malfunction.
Uh-oh. And are you rolling there too? Cool. All right, perfect. So we're going to talk about power today. We all are in a constant thirst for more power, but how do we do it? And as the majority of us are endurance road cyclists, how do we find that nice balance between putting out the power on the pedals but making it last a long time? So how are we efficient? Because it's really easy to just like grind it out and burn yourself out in 30 seconds in a sprint. But how do you last 5 hours, 6 hours, 7 hours, 8 hours, 14? So I'm gonna ask you a few questions just to start, because I would like to know, number one, who out there, when you're pedaling your bike, who out there actually thinks about what muscles you're using? Kind of? Cool, that's actually a pretty solid 50-50 start there. Who actually thinks about your posturing? Do you think about your posturing on the bike? Yes, speaking my language. And do you actually think about the phases of the pedal stroke? Do you? Okay, there you go. So we're gonna get into more detail on that today, but I break down how to have the most power for the long haul on your bike into 5 different categories today. All right, so number one is, and I am a little bit biased here, number one is I'm advancing here. Let's start off by defining power, okay? Power is, we're gonna go back to high school physics. Power is watts, right? How many watts can you put out in a set period? And it's basically what propels us forward on a bike. There's other things that might try to hold us back on a bike, lots of factors, probably a list of like 25 of them. But power is the main thing that pushes us forward. So let's try to maximize it. Again, measured in watts, and it is, basically it's nice to realize that less power isn't always a bad thing, as long as you make up for it with better posturing, such as like aerodynamics. So or riding in a line, which is also a form of aerodynamics, right? You can be riding 120 watts going 21 miles an hour if you're in a really strong pace line, right? So less power isn't always bad, provided that you actually back it up with more better aerodynamics or things like that. So what goes into a powerful and efficient pedal stroke? And I like to make this little designation between powerful, like I said before, power, you can go super hardcore 30 seconds, but you're gonna burn yourself out. It's not sustainable. So I'm talking about, in this talk, power over a long period of time. Speaking our language as endurance road cyclists, okay? Here's the 5 things that I think go into making the best, efficient, most powerful pedal stroke. Number 1, I'm biased, bike fit. If you haven't had a professional bike fit, I just want you to get one. I always tell people that. I don't care if you come to me, just get a bike fit, have somebody who's skilled at it look at you, analyze your body hopefully too, and determine where the best spot for you to be on your bike is. Where is your power position? And also that can change over time. So you're not always gonna have the same bike fit that you had like 10 years ago. Number 2, mobility. I'm gonna use the term mobility as to refer to both muscle flexibility and also mobility at your joints. So the actual shrink wrap of your joints, your joint capsule. So mobility means both joints, welcome. Mobility means both joints and muscle flexibility for our reference today. Number 3, strength. Strength meaning mostly legs and hips is what I'm going to refer to for this category, because the 4th is under that umbrella, but it's also important, it gets its own little number, core stability. You can have all the leg power in the world, but if your core sucks, good luck to you, right? You're going to probably burn yourself out pretty quickly. And number 5, if you have those 4 previous factors all taken care of, and you're being a good little endurance road cyclist, number 5 actually should come a lot easier. And we're going to go into some really fun detail. I hope that you guys enjoy this. It's kind of geeky, but it should be right up your alley. So if you have any like burning questions as I'm going, raise your hand and I'm happy to answer them. I want this to be interactive. I don't like to talk at people the whole time, so make it be interactive. I'll answer questions, but I'm also going to hang around for a long time after and have a beer and chat. So if you have any specific things that can wait later, go for it. All right, number 1, bike fit. This is an important thing to remember. Everybody deserves a fit. Everybody. I have people say all the time, well, Dr. Deb, like, I'm not a professional. I don't think I really need a fit. Like, you ride a bike, right? Like, you're a really movable, moldable human body on a fixed riding machine. You gotta have a bike fit, or else eventually, when you're not 21 years old anymore, you're gonna create some problems. So everyone deserves a fit. Tell your friends, tell your loved ones, get yourself fit. These are the factors, these 4 different things that I came up with just right off the top of my head that I see the most often in my studio that can pertain directly to basically losing power, not reaching your maximal power potential. Number 1, saddle too high. There's a lot of saddle stuff here. That's the most important part. If the saddle's not in the right position, the rest of you is going to feel a little off kilter. So saddle's too high, you're going to overreach. That makes sense, right? You're going to probably see from the back that the pelvis is tilting, and at the bottom of the pedal stroke, you're going to lose a whole lot of power because your muscles don't work well at that angle when they're being so stretched out like that. Second, saddle too low and back. I see that a lot, and that is honestly going to make you use your quads way too much, and your moneymaker, not enough. I'm going to talk about glutes all day long, because the first muscle that most people think of when you think of the pedal stroke is, yeah, exactly, quadzilla. It's like we think of the quad, but like the most powerful, largest surface area muscle in the body is the gluteus maximus. So asses are in these days, so we have no excuse. All right, the third thing I see often is a slammed stem, and this might be somebody almost trying to emulate a professional position, or just God bless the motivation too, to want to just get as aerodynamic as possible, cut through the air, and then get down to this crouch position and crunched and grind it out as much as possible. But then those people end up hurting most often, because that takes a lot of years of training, specifically progressively leading yourself into that position to be able to tolerate it without pain or without hurting yourself. So, and just for those of you that don't know, slam stem would mean that all those little cylindrical headset spacers on the top or bottom of your stem, they're all on top, and your stem is down like that. So you're basically like riding down there with your nose on the concrete. And then the 4th thing I see most often that will reduce your power output with relation to bike fit is improper cleat positioning. So if your cleat isn't in the right anatomical spot for your foot, you're gonna have just crappy leverage. Not gonna feel like you're getting the most out of pushing through the pedal. Also, if it's not in the proper rotation or in the proper width, medial lateral positioning, you're not going to be able to push straight down through the pedal. There's going to be a rotational torque that takes you away from your ultimate power potential. So those are the 4 things I see most often bike fit wise. Number 2, mobility. And again, this is going to relate to both muscle flexibility and joint mobility. If you have hang-ups in that throughout your body, mobility equals fluidity, you're going to lose that fluidity or that smoothness of your pedal stroke. It's going to be choppy, and that's going to lead to quicker muscle fatigue and not going as fast and not getting as much power out of your pedals. But from a physical therapy standpoint, if you don't have enough mobility in your joints and in your muscles to ride a bike, or the way the bike is set up, you could really cause yourself some injury because that force is going to go somewhere else. So say there's these 3 different spots that I think are the most common areas that people are hung up that really affect the fluidity and smoothness of your pedal stroke. That's lumbopelvic, so that's Latin for low back, right? And then pelvic, so right here. Hip joints, so the actual ball and socket joint. And then the ankle joint. So if there's hang-ups in those 3 joints, it's going to impede your progress to make a nice smooth pedal stroke. And so if you don't have that, you can get very commonly like back pain, mid-back pain, neck pain, saddle soreness. That's a big one. If you don't have enough pelvic motion and control to sit on your saddle the way that you should, you're going to be loading on your undercarriage in the wrong spot. And your body will tell you very quickly, right? Very quickly. All right, I just included, this is a very, very brief overview of a few things you can do. If you have your phone with you, try these tomorrow before you ride and see if you feel any fresher in the first 5 miles than usual. How long, let me ask you this. When you start off on a ride, say you're gonna go like at least, 25 or 30 miles. How many miles does it take you to feel warmed up? 10? I'm with you. I'm in the 10 category. What do you think? 10-ish? Yeah, somewhere in there. If you do these drills beforehand, just 1 round of each of them, I guarantee you that'll be less. You're going to be a little bit more primed for the cycling position. So this is the first one, and then there's one other one to loosen up them ankles. It's kind of like a track position. You're keeping your heel down, and you're closing down on that ankle, because you really need to close down on your ankle when you come up and over the pedal stroke. And if you can't, that force is going to go to other places that aren't good. Okay? So try those tomorrow, and then send me an email or shout out to me on the bike or something. Tell me if it made you feel any better in the first 5 miles, 10 miles. Okay, strength. So as I said before, strength is referring to, for our purposes here, pretty much like hip and leg strength, okay? And you can ride every day, you can ride all you want, except you're never gonna reach your full power potential on the bike if you don't do work off of the bike. So you can become, don't get me wrong, you can become a very strong cyclist on the bike by just doing that and not anything else. But oh boy, when you start to address your strength deficits and your mobility deficits off the bike, it's like a whole nother world happens. And it's gorgeous, it's beautiful. So, like we said earlier, and lots of you just shouted out, quads. That's what cycling's all about. In true physical therapist fashion, I'm gonna point out the unsung heroes of the pedal stroke. First and foremost, it's definitely the glutes. And we're talking glute max on the back, and we're also talking gluteus medius on the side. So the muscle that does this, and also a muscle that does that. The gluteus medius on the side is the one that controls, it helps to control our knee from doing this. We don't want that happening. We're gonna lose power, we could hurt ourselves, things like that. So Glutes need to be working. How many of you, when you go through the pedal stroke on your bike, how many of you feel your glutes working? Oh, it needs to be more. It needs to be more. So we're going to get into it a little in just a few minutes when we talk about the pedal stroke in more detail. But when you come up and over the pedal stroke, at around, you should be thinking about actually firing your glutes and quads together at about 12 o'clock. So like you're preparing to throw down on that push phase. You're preparing. So many people I see, they don't really engage until they get to about 3 o'clock. And then you're losing out on a big percentage of the power you could be generating. Because again, largest surface area muscle in the body, most powerful muscle potential in the body. And then there's hamstrings. We're going to talk in a little bit about should you pull up on the back end of the pedal stroke or not. I'm going to get a show of hands on that one in a moment, because that's always a fun one. I have my clinical opinion, of course, but I'd like to hear what you guys think too in a moment. Your gastrocnemius, so fancy word for calf muscle, and then the shin muscle on the front end. So the gastroc, the calf, you should actually feel it a little bit at the bottom of the pedal stroke. You should feel it engaging. If you don't, you might actually be getting like a bit of a heel drop at the bottom of the pedal stroke, which you don't want. A little earlier than that, you can. We'll get into that in a moment as well. But you should actually feel your calf muscles working a little bit, and your shin muscles should be engaged, but not overly so. Hamstrings should be engaged, but not overly so. This muscle and this muscle are not, the human body isn't designed, these muscles, these are not designed to be giant power generators for the long haul. These are, but not these. So if we try to actively use these too much, we're gonna give ourselves some pretty quick like acute tendinitis, cramping, so it's not good. All right, here's a few examples. Tip of the iceberg. Notice there's a few glute exercises in this slide. You've got your top left. You're activating mostly your gluteus maximus, and then your low back muscles, your paraspinals, are going along for the ride. Those are incredibly important as far as your core stability is concerned. Every time you push through the pedal to counteract your leg power, these muscles have to work to keep your spine in neutral. If they weren't working, everybody would look like this when they ride. But these muscles are responsible for keeping us neutral and erect and a perfect posture on the bike. You've got, on the right side, you've got a clamshell exercise, which gets that gluteus medius muscle. That's the one that, first and foremost, is responsible for controlling our knee like this, okay? And then the bottom, you have bridging, again, glute max, low back activation, paraspinals. Hamstrings with the ball, the one in the middle. That's a good one, especially if you come up on a 1 count and you go out on a 3 count. So a nice slow return out to that full leg extension. It'll teach your hamstrings to help control things a little bit better. Okay, who can do that on a bike? I know you can. You can, Nimmer. I've seen it. So, like I said earlier, you can have the strongest legs in the world, but if you don't have the core to stabilize on that saddle, it's not going to take you that far. So, as you're sitting on the saddle tomorrow, and maybe you already think this, but think about yourself as being just like a stable pillar on that saddle. No side-to-side motion, no rocking of the hips, and those are the core stabilizers that are going to be responsible for that. What's the core? The core is, in my brain, actually 6-sided. So it's got a top and a bottom, a side, and then a front and back. I think a lot of us know the front and back part. The front is like the rectus abdominis six-pack muscle, and then the lower abdominal bracing happens at that transversus, that deep muscle down here. Then you have your obliques. Those help control side-to-side movements, rotational movements. On the back of you, you've got those cords that help keep your spine neutral when you push through the pedals. But then there's the top and the bottom. So the bottom is the pelvic floor. All those tiny little muscles by our stuff. Those are important. And then on the top is, can anyone guess it? Yes, who said it? Heck, yes. I'll buy you a beer if you want one. Okay, cool. So, core is six-sided. There are a lot of things you can do to keep that core nice and stable. These are just a few of them, okay? These are a few of my favorites, actually. You got top left, you have a half kneeling anti-rotation or Palloff press. That's gonna activate some deep paraspinals in your back that are gonna make you more stable and not rotational or tilty. Top right, that's a lot on the front for sure. But look at that, look at how specific that is to the cycling position. That's a really great one to do. So you're basically in that one, you're rolling out and then coming back in without letting your hips dip down. And then you've got your classic side plank, and you've got your bird dog on the bottom. There we go. Okay. We're on number 5 already. So, like I said, if you have all those first 4 factors figured out, nailed, bike fit, joint mobility is good, you work on it daily, with muscle flexibility. You work on your flexibility daily. You work on your strength in your legs and hips a few times a week. And you work on your core stability a few times a week. If all those things are sound, the posture and technique on the bike is going to be oh so much easier. It's going to be way less difficult. And here's where we get into that. Optimal on-bike posture. So here's what we got. And you can kind of cycle through, I mean, I do all the time. You cycle through all these points on the bike constantly while you're riding, just to check in and make sure that nothing is going awry. Like, how often do you catch yourself doing that? It's very common, right? And then your neck is kind of stiff and sore at the end of the ride. So basically, number 1, shoulders relaxed. Your middle traps, lower traps engaged. So shoulder blades slightly back and down. Nothing overexert, don't overexert it, just slightly back and down. And then you have your gentle chin tuck. And then you have, and you're gonna use your eyeball muscles to look down on the road. This can get tricky if you have a tricky prescription with your glasses or anything like that, but like, ideally speaking, tuck your chin, use your eyeball muscles to look down the road. Third, elbows unlocked. 20 degrees, it's about a gold standard, somewhere in there, 20, 25. And your serratus anterior is on. Who knows where their serratus anterior is? You can't answer it because you already get a beer. Serratus, no? No, not quite. It's this one that looks like it looks jagged right here on the side of the rib cage, and its primary role is to help us do this. So if your serratus is engaged, you can actually hold yourself up on the bike better, literally, and it can also help you decrease things like hand numbness if you're getting a lot of hand numbness or neck pain. So to be able to do, you know the push-up plus position? Have you ever heard of that? You'd be on hands and knees, and then you go up like that. I had a wireless microphone last year, and this is really killing my jam right now, but, so one moment. So here, there. It is the upper body version of the cat-cow. Yes, exactly. Without this part. Just focusing on here, and as you do that, you want to feel this working, and of course your chest muscles will be working, but that can actually help you hold yourself on the bike better. Wrists are neutral. With my fits, I absolutely make sure that when your fingertips are resting on your brake lever or shifter lever, that your wrist is in a nice ergonomic handshake position. Shouldn't be like this, shouldn't be up here, it shouldn't be here, here. So, that's another factor. And then, hip hinge and knee tracking. So, hip hinge, I am definitely a stickler on this with every person that rides a bike. You need to be able to do a really stellar hip hinge. And what that looks like is, You usually have people use a stick or like a closet rod or a 5-iron, like whatever you got. But it needs to be straight. It needs to hit your head, mid, back, and butt. You hold it there. Feet are pedal width apart, knees are unlocked, like they would be at the bottom of the pedal stroke, like slight bend. From there, you fold. You'd be surprised how many people can't do this exercise and maintain those 3 contact points with the stick. Usually this happens and they lose this contact point, or this happens and they lose the top one. Or this is happening a lot and they lose all of them. Or but the middle one. So hip hinging with a stick, and I have a picture of that, I think in another slide. And then the knees tracking over the ball of the foot. That's the 6th thing on the bike. So meaning this way, that's what we're talking about. Outer hip activation. That'll keep that knee in line. There's the hip hinge. So there's your closet rod. Head, mid, back, butt. Can you fold? Can you move with the stick? Don't fight the stick, move with the stick. It's actually a really great like neuromuscular teacher for you, basically teaching you how to move and coordinate that movement if your body doesn't know how to do it. Okay, so we're going to talk about briefly the 4 stages of the pedal stroke, and it's referred to in a clock pattern. The most popular, we'll begin with phase 1, the most popular, the push or the power phase, and that's where you use your biggest muscles in your body, your quads and your glutes. And those are the money makers, those are the ones that push you forward. It's this little side note on that second bullet point. It's actually the consensus out there is to slightly drop your heel at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, somewhere in there. So when you're coming up and over, to slightly drop your heel, you're talking 10 degrees below the horizontal, to activate your hamstrings a little bit. So you're probably thinking like, wait, aren't we supposed to do that on the back end of the pedal stroke? We're going to talk about that in a second. But your hamstrings are actually a pretty powerful, not relatively speaking from the quad and glute, but your hamstrings are a hip extensor. They do this. So if we slightly come up and over, see if my balance is good today, up and over, and we slightly go, if we were here, the whole pedal stroke, if we slightly go here, that will allow us to kind of kick those hamstrings in a little bit in addition to quads and glutes, and oh boy, does that enhance the power. So try that tomorrow. It's slight, but guess what? As soon as you get to phase 2, your first transitional phase, so this is the bottom of the pedal stroke. Do you see what I did here with these little stars here? That's where we're at. So we went back on phase 1 is from 1 o'clock to 5 o'clock, see the stars. And then phase 2, transition, 5 to 7 o'clock. The point is here is to continue the whole, basically the whole push, is to try not to lose any momentum when you go down to the bottom. And if you slightly dropped your heel right about here, when you get to the bottom, you actually want to be back to here. It's a lot to think about in a split second, but it's something that over time it will become natural. Historically, this has been called like inkling. I think like historically it's also been done a lot, like people have done a lot more of a pumping motion with their foot, which actually I think you can lose power with that. But doing a little bit of an ankling where you drop that heel when you're coming up and over, it recruits even more muscles to get more power. So here we've got 5 to 7, transition pullback. And that's where you think about like a scraping motion. Don't get me wrong, I don't mean to go like this with your hamstring. I just mean scraping, you just stepped in something, you're trying to get it off your shoe. It speaks more to the angle of the ankle, the angle of the foot. So I want you to do that at the bottom of the pedal stroke, but not actually like crank up on those hamstrings too much. Because again, remember, those hamstrings are not sustainable for that amount of power effort over time. They can handle 30 seconds here and there, but they're not sustainable for 5 hours, 6 hours. Phase 3, the upstroke, or the back end, the pull, the recovery. Why do we have so many names for things? It's a lot. But the back end, this is where there's such a common misconception, I think, in the cycling world. And I think it kind of waxes and wanes, but should you actually actively pull up on the back end of the pedal stroke? The current consensus with research is no. You can actually make up for a little bit of the power loss on the back end of the pedal stroke if you do pull up, but again, it's not sustainable, and we're talking maybe 5%. So literally, because the injury risk is well over time, like tendonitis and strains and knee pain, it's just not worth it. So, does that make sense? On the contrary, instead of really actively wrenching on your hamstrings, instead, I want you to think about just really quickly getting your leg up out of the way. Leg up out of the way. Notice I'm not going like this and really wrenching on my hamstring. I'm just going leg up out of the way. Kind of like old school track drills, you know? Quick feet. Just get your leg up out of the way, get it out of the way so you can continue your next power phase, because the power phase is where we get our bread and butter, okay? All right, last phase is the second transition phase at the top. This is your setup, overstroke. Again, lots of names. I like to provide you with all the names and so you're fully well-rounded. This one, I want you thinking of pushing forward, which is kind of unique, I think, for a lot of people. You want to actually push your knee towards the handlebars as you come up and over, and that will help you to start the power phase even more quickly. There's a trend here. There's a commonality. We want to get back to that power phase as quickly as possible so we can continue to use our glutes and quads to get us further and faster. All right, there's a lot of words on there, so I can explain that. But now we're going to go to finish. We're going to go through three different concepts or three different things that are questioned in the cycling world, myths, if you will. Some of them are still the jury is out, okay? So to pull up or not, I've already touched on this. And I gave you the synopsis of what's on this slide. On the front end, you're absolutely generating a positive force. It's going to propel you forward. And then what happens on the back end, and this is all research-based stuff, what happens on the back end is you're never actually, even if you decide to actively wrench on your hamstrings and actively pull up on the back end, you could literally only gain back like 5% of your power. And it's just not worth it because those muscles aren't sustainable for that kind of effort. So the take-home message is just get your leg out of the way as soon as possible while you're doing even the power phase on the other side, right? Because when you're doing this on this side, your other side is doing that big power phase. So quick on the back end, not necessarily overly contracting your hamstrings. Okay, I'm going to read this because these words I think are gold. And this is another physio. He happens to be down under, Blair Martin in Australia. I like his logic here. He brings up good points. Your wheels are round, your cassette is round, your chain rings are probably round too, but not always. So it makes sense that your pedal stroke should be round too, right? It does. Except, think of a smooth pedal stroke not as a circle. This discounts another thing that we hear all the time in the cycling world. Pedal in a circle, pedal in a circle. It's literally impossible to pedal in a complete circle. In my opinion, I think it is okay to think about that because that'll improve potentially your smoothness, but it's not necessarily sustainable because you're overusing other muscles that I think can fatigue out pretty quickly. They're smaller muscles that aren't made for that really big power generating force that you do on the front end of the pedal stroke. So the most efficient cyclists tend to be those who remain stable in the saddle while rapidly, get your foot out of the way, rapidly alternating power from the downstroke on one leg to the other, especially if they can do this at a high cadence, 90 RPM or higher. In fact, if you focus on a particular phase of the pedal stroke while riding, like literally go, okay, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, chances are you're actually impeding the downstroke of the other leg, right? It's like your own brain gets in the way of your performance. right? Does that make sense? Yeah. This is another one. So, do you need clipless pedals, clipless meaning cleats on your shoes, to get optimal power output? This one is, it depends, okay? It depends. How many people ride clipless on their bike? Yes, how many ride flats? Yeah. God bless you. So this is about you right here. So, Amalia, the optimal pedal stroke and efficiency or smoothness can actually more easily be achieved using flat pedals. What? Right? Because you actually have to work to stabilize your foot on the pedal a little bit. But guess what? Remember what our main power generator is. It's the push phase. It's the front end. It's the push phase. It's the front end. So whether you're clipped in or not, you're still going to get the same thing out of your push phase. So the thing that actually propels us forward and has more bang for our buck, the push phase, it doesn't matter what kind of pedal you use. So boom, take a picture of that. I'll send it to you with a star on it. And then they also highlight with research out there that clipless pedals, you can get a more rapid onset of fatigue, but I think that had to do with people actively pulling up on the back end of the pedal stroke and burning their legs out prematurely, okay? There's exceptions, and I highlight this in the first bullet point. Clipless pedals are better for all-out sprints, or if you're doing, say, like a track start, a standing start, or going up a hill. So hills are found to be easier in a clipless pedal, but that being said, it's not, the difference isn't as profound as you'd think. Okay. And the last little point of contention out there in the cycling world I'm going to talk about is oval chain rings. These have kind of like waxed and waned over the years as well in popularity. Currently, correct me if I'm wrong, but currently I think they're most popular on mountain bikes. The idea of the oval chain ring is that it takes away that dead spot. Remember those transition phases on the top and bottom? It takes away that dead spot of the pedal stroke and accentuates especially that power phase. You don't have to lift your leg up as much before you start mashing again. Now you could imagine that actually might increase your likelihood to give yourself some overuse injury too though. Like knee pain, tendonitis, stuff like that. For mountain biking, I think it's currently the most popular, like more popular choice than it is for like endurance road cyclists. So I have a few summary bullet points here, and you see the background on the slide? That's a power diagram, and that's of a professional cyclist. So tell me that you can pedal in a circle, truly. You can't. It's impossible. Biomechanically, almost impossible. I call it the peanut because it just looks like a peanut. But that is actually a really good looking pedal stroke on a power diagram. So just to summarize, a few things. How do you achieve a smoother, more fluid pedal stroke? And remember, it may not be the most powerful, but you're basically, these factors will help you to create the most power over a sustained amount of time, okay? Address joint mobility and muscle flexibility deficits regularly. I say daily. You gotta stretch daily as a cyclist. If you put yourself in this position for hours on end all week, oh boy, you gotta reverse it very often. Display your cadence on your bike computer. Forget the speed. Take it off. Forget it. Put the cadence on there. On my main screen on my computer, I have side-to-side power symmetry readout. I do have watts on there. I have cadence and I have heart rate, but there's no speed on my screen. And then when I get off my bike, the first thing I do is I look at my side-to-side power symmetry index. And if it's outside of 2% difference side to side, I don't sleep well that night. I'm just kidding. So cadence drills, teaching your legs how to turn over quickly. And I think I may have skipped over this in the start. It was on the slide, but I may have skipped over it. Remember in high school physics class, power equals force times velocity? Remember that little equation? P equals F times V. Oh yes, so what does that tell us? It tells us in order to increase our power on our bike, basically to go further faster, we either need to increase our force or increase our velocity. So force is literally watts, power through the pedal, and then velocity is cadence. So if you can find that optimal balance between how many watts you can actually generate through the pedal and keeping a 90 plus cadence, you're gonna set yourself up for optimal performance on your bike. Power equals force times velocity. That's why the people that also are just like really high rate spinners, they're annoying sometimes because you're like, God, you just keep going, you're so fast. Yeah, they're thinking about that equation. Power equals force times velocity. They're just a little bit more on the cadence or the velocity side of that, potentially, rather than generating lots of watts on the bike. But they're still getting there at the same time as you are, right? In the off season, or even during the in season, but I don't know why you'd want to miss days like this, use rollers. How many have used rollers before? Beautiful, beautiful. I've tried them before. I had to be in a doorway, that's for sure. It was terrifying, but that would actually be a good instance to actually use flat pedals, so it's less terrifying. So flat pedals on rollers, that's an awesome equation for improving your pedaling efficiency, smoothness. And then cross-train as a cyclist, cross-train. Mountain biking, cyclocross terrifies me. I'm a roadie triathlete at my heart, at my core, but I make myself go out and I make myself do some mountain biking. I got a few scars from it, but like it terrifies me, but I know it's good. Because like, if you don't have a smooth pedal stroke on your mountain bike, what happens? You skip, you lose traction. So mountain bikers actually make some of the best road racers around. I don't know if you knew that. It's cool. They know how to turn over the pedals really quickly and they have a really smooth and efficient pedal stroke. So they're danger out on that road in a good way. And then stop doing one-legged drills. This has been something that over the years, there's lots of coaches and other folks in the cycling world that have highly advised just to make yourself more symmetrical side to side. Do a one-legged pedal. For the recreational cyclist, that actually can do more hurt than harm. It's really easy, kind of like actively wrenching on your hamstring and pulling up on the back of the pedal stroke. It's very easy to hurt yourself and strain something you don't want to. Knee joints, hamstrings, even quads, but like even back, anything in the pelvic area. One-legged drills are not worth it. I would actually advise, as a physical therapist, for you to get off the bike and do more single leg stability and strength drills. Make sure that you feel symmetrical on each side rather than trying to do it on the bike. Okay? We've hit the end of this. That was a lot of information and I'm super proud of you guys for listening the whole time. Yeah. Are there any questions or things that you just want to like add or throw in there? I'm happy to chat privately too. Jamie, yeah. Come on up here, Jamie. Come on up.
Do you change your strategy slightly in your position when you're climbing hills?
Yes, so that's definitely like one of the exceptions. Oh, sure, I'll repeat it, yes. So should you change your strategy with your posture and technique, right, when you're riding up a hill? And definitely the answer is yes. It comes back to a few things I said before. One of the exceptions to actually actively use your hamstrings on the back end of the pedal stroke. If it's a quick hill, you can use your hamstrings to help yourself get up more. Heck, I even use my lats to get up hills. Like that. You bring your arms down on the bars, it nails your core in, you're one solid cyclist on the bike, and you can drive up hills literally using your lats a bit more. That's fun. But But going up a hill, you're not gonna be able to maintain a 90 plus cadence. I mean, if you are, you're gonna burn yourself out really quickly, right? So lower cadence is fine, but you gotta find what works for you. You definitely wanna make sure you're using your glutes. If you don't feel your glutes going up a hill, that's definitely a recipe to burn out pretty quickly, or to give yourself some upset knees and things like that. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of intricacies. Hand position, some people climb better in the drops, but we don't really think about that. Like most people, as a default, we hold on to our hoods, we stand up and we crank. Or if we're trying to save energy, we stay seated and we hang on to the hoods and we crank. But vary your hand position and put your hands, if you can tuck enough, if you can hip hinge enough, you can put your hands on the drops and crank up a hill as well. Try it. Some people actually prefer it because it gets them lower and they feel more connected to the bike. I bet you've done that with racing before, right? In a sprint, you get down, same thing goes with like going up a hill. Does that answer your question? Cool. All right. Anybody else? Does anybody else have anything to add or a question? Yes, sir, Mike.
Number one thing for older cyclists, something we should focus on.
Ooh. Yes, please define older. 65 plus?
60.
60 plus. Awesome. Well, the first thing that comes to mind is as we age, we lose fluid in our tissues, in our joints, in our joint capsules, in our intervertebral discs, in our muscles, and our tendons. We lose fluid. So the first thing that comes to mind is you got to do daily mobility and flexibility exercise. The second probably most common thing would be also, as we get past age 40, it's 40 for females, 50 for males. You guys last another 10 years with losing, but you get to have another 10 years without having to think about losing your strength yet. But at age 40 for women and age 50 for men is when we start to even more exponentially lose it if we don't use it. So we have to actually do resisted exercise. It doesn't need to be crazy amount of weight, but resisted exercise to not lose our muscle strength. So probably my points number 2 and number 3 of the presentation. Yeah, and you might want to consider too that like maybe you aren't able to do the volume that you used to do in the past, and you go on more like you ride maybe just as often or maybe more, but maybe you just don't ride as many miles in a day, just because our muscles and our tissues take longer to recover as we age as well. But we got to honor that. You know, I'm 45 now, and I find that like if I push myself really hard, 2 days off the bike is great, and I welcome it. I enjoy the free time. And I don't feel guilty about it. I don't feel like I'm losing performance. But we gotta be mindful of that. So joint mobility, flexibility exercise daily. You gotta do off the bike strengthening to combat age-related muscle strength loss. And then thirdly, really honor your recovery time and your recovery practices. Great question. What else you got? All right. Oh, yes. We have one of the representatives of Team Spoktacular here.
Okay, so we talked a lot about power, we talked a lot about watts, we talked about measuring it. Now the equipment to measure it varies, right? So I use a Stages, which is a meter on the left crank arm, and then it extrapolates it for both legs to measure your power. There's also pedal monitors, there's hub-based power meters. Is there something recommended that works better to actually know how much watts you're putting out?
Great question. I can't say that I have all the technical knowledge on that, and there might even be people out there that know more than me about this, but you know, ideally speaking, if you can put down the money for it, to have a dual-sided power readout is awesome, but of course you're talking about like $1,000. For some people that is just not doable. I'd say to just have the tool out there, but just to not take it, you don't need to take it quite as literally as maybe you would think. Use it more as a teaching tool and use it more as a relative thing. So if you're just using a left-sided power meter, it might not be as accurate, but if you just focus more on the relative gains over time, I think that's a good place to be. So take it with a grain of salt, but like focus more on your personal gains, relatively speaking, over time, because you can't always fully rely on the exact accuracy of it. But again, I'm definitely not an expert on all the power meters that there are out there. I do know the dual side is obviously the gold standard, but not everybody has $1,000 to drop on that. But great question as well. Are we sealing it up? Okay, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate your time.